One rancher, who has spent his life around these animals, described them as a souped-up hot rod hiding inside a minivan shell. And once you see the numbers behind that line, you will never look at a parked-looking buffalo the same way again. It just stands there in a field until it very suddenly does not. Today, on Guess What I Found Out, we are talking about the American buffalo. And stick around, because by the end of this, we are getting into a relationship between one animal and one group of people that has lasted longer than most civilizations on Earth. Let's just call it what that rancher already nailed, the minivan hot rod, because a fully grown bull can weigh more than a ton, stand taller than 6 feet at the shoulder, and stretch past 10 feet long without even counting the tail. Quick side note, the animal on that nickel and in that title is technically a bison, not a true buffalo. Real buffalo live in Africa and Asia. Somewhere back in history, English-speaking settlers just borrowed the wrong word, and it stuck for good. Anyway, something built like that should not be able to move, and yet it can clear a 6-foot fence, cover roughly 7 feet in a single horizontal jump, by some estimates, and hit around 35 miles an hour, which is faster than you can legally drive through most neighborhoods. It looks like a parked car. It runs like it stole the car. As big as that sounds, the modern buffalo is actually on the smaller end of what once roamed this continent. Woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, ancient camels, and a now extinct relative called the giant longhorned bison all shared the plains, and that ancient bison carried horns spanning more than 8 feet from tip to tip. When humans first arrived in North America, likely more than 20,000 years ago, by some of the newest evidence, nearly 50 of the continent's biggest species eventually disappeared, mammoths and giant sloths included in a wave of extinctions that peaked thousands of years later. Scientists still argue over how much of that was hunting, how much was a changing climate, and how much was both working together at once, and the actual die-off itself was concentrated into a surprisingly narrow window, only a couple thousand years, even though humans and those giant animals had already been sharing the continent for a long stretch before that. The modern minivan hot rod is essentially what was left standing once the dust settled and it filled that empty space by the millions, eventually numbering in the tens of millions across the plains. Go ahead and hit subscribe now, because this is where the relationship really gets interesting. Bison and the people of the Great Plains did not just happen to live near each other. Researchers who study this describe it as genuine coevolution. Two species shaped by each other's presence for roughly 10,000 years, ebbing and flowing together, but always rebounding. Buffalo calves are proof of how seriously that pressure shaped the species. A newborn calf can stand within about half an hour of birth and is running alongside the herd within just a few hours, reaching speeds up to 35 miles an hour within its very first week of life. There is no toddler phase out on the open plains. Wolves and other predators are watching every birth, and a calf that cannot keep pace with the herd within hours simply does not get a second chance. When your entire evolutionary history is built around being hunted, you do not get a slow childhood. Here is where it gets genuinely surprising, because the minivan hot rod was not just surviving on the plains, it was quietly engineering them. When bison pause to dig at the ground with their horns and roll in the dust, they created shallow depressions called buffalo wallows. Multiply that by millions of bison over thousands of years, and you get millions of wallows, and each one does double duty. It is a dirt bath first, but after rain it becomes a shallow pool that holds water on the landscape. The disturbed soil around each wallow also attracts a different mix of plants than the surrounding prairie. Plants that specifically favor churned-up, sun-exposed ground over dense, established grass. That different plant mix then draws in other wildlife looking for something the rest of the prairie was not offering. And historically it drew in people too, who knew exactly which wallow edges to check for useful plants. An animal that was just taking a dust bath to deal with flies and shed its winter coat was, completely by accident, quietly building tiny wetlands and unique plant habitat scattered across an entire continent, millions of times over. Tell me in the comments what surprised you most about how much impact one grazing animal can have on an entire landscape, and why, because it only gets bigger from here. If you are into extinct giants shaping the world they left behind, go check out our episode on the 7-ton angry chicken, because prehistoric megafauna apparently never do anything small. Now stay with me, because the next part of this story is not really about biology anymore. For native nations of the plains, the relationship with buffalo went far beyond food, shelter and tools, though it absolutely included all of that. Many tribal origin stories describe bison emerging from the earth itself before human beings even existed, at sacred sites like Wind Cave in South Dakota's Black Hills and the Wichita Mountains in what is now Oklahoma. The Kiowa specifically traced their people's migration from near the Yellowstone headwaters down through the Black Hills and eventually to those Wichita Mountains, learning their sun dance along the way from the Crow, a ceremony that could not be held without a buffalo bull at its center. The Mandan had an entire white buffalo cow society, led by respected elder women who danced through the night, wrapped in the hide of a rare white buffalo to call the herds closer. Many tribes describe buffalo as having their own families, their own societies, and the ability to take other forms to communicate directly with people, which is a very different framework than simply calling an animal a resource. And hunting itself was never treated as simply taking something. It was approached as prayer, an actual request made to the animal, asking that it give itself, and that relationship was carried out with intention and gratitude on every single hunt, not convenience. That kind of attentiveness reminds me a lot of what we found with the Sprout Scouts, a couple videos back, seedlings that turned out to be listening for water they could not even touch. Whether it is a plant tuning into vibration or a nation of people building an entire spiritual practice around one animal's willingness to give itself, the pattern keeps repeating. Paying close enough attention to something for long enough reveals a relationship most of us would never think to look for. The American buffalo nearly disappeared entirely by the late 1800s, driven down from somewhere around 30 million animals to as few as several hundred left alive by the 1880s. And the story of how both the animal and its relationship with Plains nations survived that near-total collapse is its own massive topic for another day. But the core of the relationship stayed intact this whole time, carried forward specifically by the nations who never stopped treating the animal as family. When the buffalo are healthy, the land is healthy, and when the land is healthy, the buffalo are healthy right back. That loop, sustained by both an ecosystem and a culture built to protect it for thousands of years, is still turning today, and it is still being actively rebuilt. If this gave you a new appreciation for the animal on the nickel, smash that like button and subscribe so you catch what we dig up next. Thanks for watching. See you there, Curious George.